Hello and welcome to Off the Record. This is the 50-something episode, and we have a very special guest on the show today, our third guest, and his name is Mike Mowery. Hi, Mike.
Hello, Zach.
You're replacing Jesse for the rest of the show. Is that accurate?
Sounds about right. I'm sure that my skill set could completely replace his.
I think you also like dance music, which fits well. It's a problem to me, but it fits well in the replacement category, I think.
The question is, what subjects will get you cursing as much as me that are Taylor Swift in 5 Seconds of Summer?
Yeah, that is a good question. I don't know. I mean, Jesse, I know that Zach likes to talk about your age, but being older than you, I've really mellowed out in my years.
You know, I have too, but there's still some things that really set me off.
I can't imagine being older than Jesse. So, Mike, I don't even know.
Nice.
Well, Zach, maybe one day you'll make it this far.
Maybe, probably not, but maybe.
Stay away from those peanuts.
Okay, thank you. Fair enough.
I heard Zach's always around peanuts.
Mike is the founder of Outerloop Management, and he manages bands. Mike, am I allowed to say some of the bands you manage?
Sounds good to me.
Mike manages bands Refused. I've never heard of them, but I'm told that they mattered. And
no past tense there.
Mattered. And another popular band as well called Silverstein that are on Rise Records. And then a bunch of other bands and under his company like Crown the Empire, Set It Off, many more. There's a lot of bands, Mike. There's a lot of bands. How many bands are in the company? You probably can't even count them.
I get that report in around 5:16 every day, because at the massive operation that Outerloop Management is, there's always bands coming and going, Zach.
Always bands coming and going. And you have several people under you as well, and we'll probably get into that later on in the episode. How long have you known Jesse, Mike?
I think this is the first time that I'm actually conversing with him, unless he wants to correct me. I believe...
I think that is true, but it's funny because I feel like I know you because I've been listening to so many podcasts on them. Like when I tuned into Edgeland, despite my extreme lack of edge, I hear you on there.
Yeah. I've been making the rounds on the podcast circuit. I was going to say when we were talking about replacements that I think the three of us all have very unique and distinct voices.
Very true.
And therefore, I could easily replace Jesse with just having a very unique voice.
And if we get Finn McKenty on here, the whole thing's complete.
Exactly. I don't know if I haven't told either of you this, but when I first found out about this podcast, I was trading some stuff, like some podcasts with Johnny Minardi, and I do a bunch of producer management with him. And we were bonding over our love for cereal, or at least just kind of I'd say the obsession with it as it was coming out. And so we started trading a whole bunch of stuff. And he mentioned that this one was done by Zach. He mentioned Zach from Property of Zach, and I downloaded it and I listened to it, and I was like, Johnny, there is no chance in hell I'm going to be able to get through this entire episode with that kid's voice ringing in my ears.
Incredible. Well, great. And now we're friendly, but wonderful. Thank you.
Exactly. So, and the first time that I met you, Zach, I was texting Johnny and telling him what a unique and surreal experience it was. You were that guy with the voice that, was now here live in person. So you're kind of, you might be a little bit of a rock star.
I don't know. That sounds like an ego hit, not an ego boost. A lot of that sounds like an insult, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, backhanded compliments are one of my many specialties. I think that's what I get from being a hardcore kid.
I was going to say, that really, if there's any trait that comes from 90s hardcore, it's like backhanded compliments are like a true trait of it.
Yeah, the thickest sarcasm that ever was, usually allows that to shine through. So anyway, Zach, it was nice to hang out with you.
It was.
And we've done that a couple times now.
We have, except when I come to DC, you are always on a plane elsewhere.
Yeah.
But, so on this episode, we thought, kind of like the episode we did with Jeff from Run for Cover, we thought it would be nice to just go through some general questions with Mike about his career, and then to also have a conversation take us elsewhere. But Mike, just from speaking with you. And, actually, I was educated by Mike once in a Drexel classroom not too many weeks ago. You came through management, not through management. You were in bands, I think, and then tour managed and ended up here, which I think is...
And had a label.
And had a label. Which I think is how a lot of people end up in management, by coming from a different avenue in music. Did you expect to ever get and to settle into management, or was it going to just be another stepping stone for you?
I never really did. I mean, it's kind of just been one sort of opportunity presented itself to me after another. And when the timing felt right for each opportunity to, be embraced, I kind of just went with each of those things.
So what was the opportunity that took you from being band guy and, let's be honest, putting out hardcore records in the 1990s is not exactly a truly real job, no matter how much time it took to stuff 7 inches into plastic back then. What did present itself that took you this way? Was there any defining moment?
It was really about the glue stick more than the plastic bag. I mean, that's how we got really DIY, was having the come over and help glue the covers together parties. Well, no, I think a pretty good example. So in the, early to mid 90s, I was putting out records. I was going to school in California. We put on shows at our house. We're doing things very, very, very DIY. And I finished college with an environmental science degree and was trying to find, the way that I could, my path within that career. And I was coming up a little bit empty. There was a few hurdles. A lot of people in that field were getting master's degrees, and they were a step or two ahead of me. And I was going to get I was going to do an internship at an environmental law firm, and that same week, Dave, the guitar player from Botch, called me and said, "Hey, we're about to head out on a tour. Do you want to come with us?" So, as a guy that had toured before and traveled extensively and kind of has this wanderlust, I said, "You bet." And I pretty much turned. That was the first step towards really moving towards that nomadic lifestyle that led me into a band. And from the band, that then led me into tour management. And from tour management, that led me into management.
A common trajectory, I would say.
Yeah, I think so. As Zach pointed out, I think a lot of people in management do come from having some other skill set that they view, that hopefully the industry deems worthy in this day and age, where touring is such a significant component of a band's existence. I think a lot of us former tour managers have found a place to continue to advise them. And so many of the skill sets that a tour manager needs to employ are so relevant in getting things done, finding solutions, all of those types of things that really do help in the managerial sphere.
So I have a question so my father, for example, went to school for American history, but then went into advertising. And you have a degree in environmental science. We talked to so many kids who are going through the college thing, and then they decide they may want to do music. Has environmental science ever had any bearing on what you do today? And is there anything they could learn from how different? Because if you hear environmental science and you think band manager, you think, God, what the hell does that have to do with each other? But I think there's always something to draw from most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, the river coefficient of, pollutants going into the water has absolutely no bearing on management unless a band rents an RV and accidentally dumps their waste in which does happen, in a spot that it is not meant for it to be dumped. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this because as I'm doing the management and I'm also doing some of the educational stuff with Kevin Lyman's The Entertainment Institute, to me, what college seems to do for a lot of people is A, allow them to have some time to mature, and B, allow them to really figure out how to do things. College does require showing up on time every once in a while. It does require working in groups every once in a while. It does require turning things in and turning them in on time. And so I think that is a huge component of why, as an employer, not with any exclusivity, but I tend to find that the people who have been through that process work a little bit better for me.
That's interesting because, how do you feel about then programs like a music industry program?
I think it's great. I think it's really interesting that that's even available. And so
we
many
get
people,
questions a lot from listeners if it's worth it, if instead you should take a business degree or something. That's something Jesse and I have talked about a lot, where I am in a music industry program for 2 more weeks. And I would advise people not to take a music industry program, actually.
Yeah, and without being in the middle of it, I can't necessarily comment. One of the reasons why I enjoy going to those programs is I think that it helps give people a bit more of a realistic expectation and of what being in the industry involves, especially at the level that we're on, which is still relatively grassroots. I mean, developing artists is what our company really thrives in. So I think that getting the knowledge, and again, I don't know how developed the Drexel program is and some of the other ones, but getting a lot of that knowledge so you can go and speak intelligently about the business very early on, I can imagine would be somewhat beneficial.
Sure. To me, where college is like a benefit for someone who's hoping to work in music is that you get a 4-year pass to, assuming that you may not have to pay all of your college bills or don't have to work like a typical job, that you can get at least minimum wage at. It's a good 4 years to try a bunch of things and to try to get ahead of, just starting out in a potential career path after college where, you could intern at a different place if you live in a city where there's a lot of music things happening on for every term for 4 years, right? Like that's feasible. And that's really beneficial, I would imagine, to starting, potentially working and being paid following graduation.
I'd be curious. But you are saying that you like to hire people who have a college degree, whereas, like, for example, my first job second job post college was with Alan Douches at West Side Music, and he actually likes to hire people who don't have college degrees because he thinks it gives them bad expectations.
Yeah, which I think could make sense, and I understand why he would say something like that. I also think that the spheres that he and I are in are probably a little bit different, although not completely different. And this has been through a lot of trial and error. And it could just be, it's not like I hire 10 people a year. Hopefully, I only hire one every couple of years because the team that we've built is relatively solid. But I did have a number of younger people come in and work for me who I don't think their expectations were incredibly high, but I also don't think that they had the skills necessary to manage bands. Nowadays it's so easy for young people to hop right in, and maybe it's always been this way, but to me, from what I see, it's really easy for a lot of young people to hop right in and say, okay, I'm managing, when they are managing some component of the band's business. Oftentimes it's their social media or something of that nature that doesn't require the wide-eyed, inclusive view of everything that totals what I think a manager should do.
So can you expand on that wide-eyed, inclusive view?
Well, sure. It's a very holistic approach. It's getting in with the band and helping them set their goals and making sure that their goals are realistic, and then managing not only their expectations, but serving all of the people, building a team if they don't have one, i.e. an agent, a label, a merchandise company, a publisher, an attorney, a business manager. And not all bands have all of those things right from the start, but then it's managing each and every one of those pieces of, members of the team. And dealing with being ahead of the problems, looking out and seeing what problems may come from a given situation and trying to get ahead of those, as well as when the really interesting problems come up, which Zach, when you sat in the class that I was speaking at, a problem emerged right then and there. It's having the maturity and the life experience to know how to deal with so much of the problems that really can make or break a band.
Mm-hmm. In general, you like to work with people that are able to work in multi levels of like kind of the real world, like whether it's a crisis or whether it's being in a meeting or whether it's going out and having a drink with someone to, talk or mingle, whatever, like working with people that are multifunctional.
Yeah, as well as, make no mistake, I do not think that a college education is required to do what I do. One of my best friends in the entire world dropped out of school in high school. And, he's one of the smartest people that I know. So it's not as if I, without fail, hold this line. It's just been in my experience with what I'm doing. But, it's a really good point. One of the issues that we run into all the time with younger people, and it's not to say it doesn't happen with older people, and I've had to figure out my own strategy is, but like, how do you engage your own social media? Are you posting things that are bragging because you've had some opportunity for an artist and therefore you're associating yourself with it and it's completely tacky? Or are you doing things like engaging in behaviors that probably shouldn't be public knowledge if you're going to represent a client? And so there's a lot of stuff like that, like you said, Zach, sitting in meetings, being professional, being able to interact with the people in the business that do the business.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you mentioned like how you carry yourself. I guess I get in trouble a lot on social media because I share my opinions of things that should not be shared potentially if I disagree with someone, because that could have an adverse effect on the bands I technically work for fully. And that's something I struggle with still. I try to get better at it, and I hope to continue to get better at it, but it's not easy.
Yeah, and I think that there's a balance in that. You need to be able. You're human, and we live in an age where social media is part of all of our lives for the most part. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having an opinion, but yeah, it really depends on how you act and react when if you just state something that's not offensive to anyone, but it's an intelligent opinion, that's one thing. If people engage you and you start to react in ways that aren't becoming of a professional, okay, that becomes a problem.
Right, and that reflects on those that you work with ultimately.
Yeah, and nobody's perfect. We all do things, and that's sort of been a recurring theme recently within, especially the Warped Tour world, or people that are doing things and screwing up. And the one thing that I've had to reiterate to myself and to others is, look, nobody is perfect. Mm-hmm. Obviously there's extremes and there's things that need to be handled in a particular way, but we all screw up. It's about, do we learn from that mistake?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's that. There's also, I think, a maturity that comes with, like, what I think is very funny. I follow, as we all know, I'm a political nerd, and some of the best reporters I know who are early to mid 30s, I still see them posting totally inappropriate, irresponsible things to be posting on social media. And just because you're great at something, just because you're this, there is a thing that does discount you in this day and age if you don't learn what's appropriate. And not to say I'm the arbiter of this. I obviously post when I'm having too many drinks and enjoying a really lovely dinner all the time. But I've made a conscious thing that I like to be seen in that way too, that I have a life outside of this and what I enjoy, because I think it brings other people to me. Like, perfect example is I meet people professionally all the time and go, hey, good restaurants to go to. Let's go eat an expensive meal together, and that's more worth it to me. And I think that all of this is a risk reward. And I think, Zach, you've decided that the risk of you saying some of these things and sometimes talking shit on a publicity campaign is worth the reward.
I don't know if it's always worth the reward, but I seem to not be able to not do it. So I guess so.
Well, and you can remove it from social media. You can put yourself in professional situations, and I'm a pretty opinionated guy. And especially when it comes down to, the artists and working on their behalf and being passionate about them and all of that, there's times that I probably say things to other people that, I hope they're within the professional realm, but you can choose how to carry yourself in any capacity within the business or otherwise. And, part of all of this is Jesse, you have to be true to yourself. I think that's an important thing. I don't think it makes a whole bunch of sense to completely suppress one part of your personality just for the sake of, not worrying about getting yourself in trouble.
To switch gears a little bit, I guess, Mike, you work, like we mentioned at the top of the show, you work with bands like Refused, but then your company also represents, I would say, I guess, more current bands like Crown the Empire, Set It Off. Does your role when you interact with those widespread of bands change greatly? You're closer to the age of a member of Refused, but obviously you're older than someone in Crown the Empire. The bands I work with are typically from the same age to 4 years older than me, something like that. But what is it like as you kind of start to just be in a different, just different generational periods with some of the bands that you work with? Do your roles change and how you interact?
Yeah, I think, by and large, I think the biggest challenge for those of us in the business is how do you relate and do all of the business side of things effectively, but also be able to turn around and relate to the artists themselves. And that can be a challenge sometimes because, each artist is very different. It's not to say that people within the business aren't different, but, the artists, some can be really easy to deal with. Some can be a tad more difficult. But I think in regards to especially the developing artists, Zach, I like to see myself as a bit more of like a mentor at this point in my career. When I first started, I managed a band called Darkest Hour, who I still manage today. And the guitar player, Mike, from that band is still one of my best friends. And we've had a very different relationship than I have had with many of the artists that I picked up later on. He and I are peers, more or less. I am a little bit older than him, but so we see things from this like very same level playing field, which can be beneficial and it can also be detrimental. And the same thing with developing artists. We see things typically from a little bit different perspectives. But one of the things I like to pride myself on is I realize that the artist, no matter what level they're at, is the eyes and ears of the operation that's out on the road. And I really like to get feedback from them on just about anything and everything so we can incorporate that into the strategy of whatever we're doing to manage the band. Some bands, we're trying to grow. Other bands, we're trying to establish ourselves as a headliner, any number of those things.
I think that's a great point about the eyes and the ears, and I think that's really understated. I used to have to say the same thing I always saw myself in a managerial role as I did a lot of the marketing and coming up with the ideas, but I also said that the bands I worked with have to be out there in the field also finding the stuff, and then we come up with a way to do what we see other people doing better.
Yeah, very good point. I mean, I truly try to view what we do as a team. I came up with this metaphor a long time ago where a band and a management, it's sort of like a basketball team, the team you're building around them. And the band and the manager are kind of the co-captains. And then you've got your booking agent and your record label, which, in this day and age, that's an ever-changing consideration. And then, so those are 4 players on the team. And then the 5th is really a utility player. Those are the people you're not talking to every single day. Could be your merchandiser, although you do talk to them pretty frequently, especially when you're out on the road and doing your online stuff. But, that's your attorney, your publicist, your business manager, you name it. And so to me, I came up with this because a long time ago when I was first doing the management, when I was first managing artists, I had a record label say to me, I got the band on this tour. Now it's your turn to step up. And I kind of said, I sort of said, well, listen, you did get them on that tour, but it's like we backed off once we got that tour, and it's not like we could get another tour. And so I sort of started thinking about what that made sense. And I said, look, if we're on a basketball team and it's coming down to, shooting the last shot to win the game, which landing this tour, which at the time was Warped Tour for a developing band, that's like hitting, a buzzer beater at the end of the game. If the star player takes the shot and makes it, great, we won. If the star player doesn't take the shot and somebody else takes it and we score and win, it's the same result. And so everyone needs to be working together. Yes, people have their specialty roles, but if the center shoots a 3-pointer because he's the guy that's open and gets the ball and it goes in, everybody's celebrating.
Agreed. I think that's also a really good way with any relationships to remember. Is like, I think we see so many, whether it's dating, friendship, or band relationships just within the band, fail because people have an expectation that you did this and now you're owed something, when really it is we're all doing things. We should all consider that there is different roles always happening, and sometimes those roles are going to shift where one person carries the other person's weight, but hopefully then there's a symbiosis where other times that person's carrying other weights.
Agreed wholeheartedly. I mean, and that's, obviously part of the maturity that you've been through and been in relationships. And so when I say having life experience, having been through a number of relationships before I met my wife, and even having to deal with, the expectations between her and me, we've had to figure out those ways to look at things differently. Which helps when I turn around and deal with the artists and deal with their inner struggles, which can be sometimes the hardest part of working with an artist.
Mm-hmm. So on that note, I feel like musicians often have like kind of fantasy trajectories and look at how like a certain band or a certain musician like got popular, and then they try to emulate that. You post some like really inspiring stories of the trajectories you've had with certain artists. What are some like misconceptions you see in trajectories of how an artist gets popular? Like, what do you see like when you first start with a baby band that they have an expectation of that seems to be really unrealistic?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite fascinating because some of them do have these expectations and some of them don't. And I never want to like strip an aspiring artist of what they think they can achieve within a certain amount of time. But it's always so helpful to monitor the feedback to see if the world is paying attention in that same capacity. So, and that's where I think that breakdown can come is, hey, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this, and the results aren't adding up. And so one of the things that I've said to many young artists, and I have to remind myself of this all the time, because as I've taken a long time to grow my company and still run into struggles all the time, you just can't speed up time. Things take a long time to develop. Again, because I seem to be the king of the metaphor, it's like if you're going to grill some vegetables. As a vegetarian, I'll be grilling vegetables. If you guys are meat eaters, you can order up whatever you want.
Oddly enough, right before you hopped on Skype, Jesse was talking about how he had fired up his grill for the first time this weekend and would like me to come over, and I can use a separate side of his grill to be meat free, and I guess we're all welcome together.
Yeah, it's true. I got a vegan chef living with me. I have to be accommodating.
I like that. So, the vegan chef can probably tell us if we're going to grill some vegetables, we should probably cut them up, put them in some marinade and let them sit for a while. And then once the grill comes on, put them on there on some sort of medium heat. So they're cooked to perfection and delicacy. So Zach and I can enjoy our vegetarian, candlelight dinner. Where, the other thing, and this is where some artists want it this way, they just, they think, okay, I got the tools to let, the marinade is on really quickly. Let's turn the burner on as high as we can and see if we can get a bit of a flash in the pan. And the hard part is there are always exceptions to the rule. And I've tried to convey to the artists that comparing yourself to anyone else just isn't really effective. It's not to say you shouldn't have some awareness of what others are doing. As you said, Jesse, there's plenty of times that you can look at what someone else is doing. And if, a trend is working or a strategy is working within marketing or anything else, you can emulate that. You can take that and make it better. But to say, I want to be just like them, and have you could put in the exact same amount of work and in the exact same amount of time, and you'll almost always get a completely different result.
Right. There's so many little things. It's impossible. It's nearly impossible to recreate anything with music, just because none of the songs are the same, and that's a lot of the time, hopefully, what it comes down to as well. Besides the decisions, Mike, when it comes down to, I assume you've worked with some bands that you've maybe picked up within the last year, and then, like you mentioned, Darkest Hour. How long have you been managing them for?
Darkest Hour I started with, it was the first act I managed. That was about 2004.
Okay, so over 10 years. What are kind of your favorite points when you work with a band? Is it those early developmental stages when they may be like a quote unquote baby band, or is there not one thing that you necessarily prefer over the lifetime of a band?
And there's nothing more rewarding than watching all of your hard work come to fruition and having an artist at a more developed stage. But I do enjoy the developmental stages, the very early stages of getting everything in line, working and focusing on the branding, trying to go in and work and figure out and find and leverage the opportunities, ensuring that, they're making the best record possible. And that may be through, having them speak to a number of producers and doing all of that stuff. And again, when you have established artists, it doesn't mean that you're not still doing those things, but it is really cool to watch as things build and build and build. So yeah,
cool.
I feel like I've given like many answers, and Zach's just like, cool.
No, to me,
is this the most boring thing you've ever done, Zach?
I'm just thinking about it compared to like where all the bands I'm currently working with are in, are 0 to 5 years old, I guess. And it's all very, like we were just saying, like no band is the same, regardless if it's the same kind of music, if they do the same tours with or around each other, but they're all in the same process of like, we're somewhere between A and B, and we haven't yet come to like that third act yet as a band. It's all just very early development, and I enjoy some of it a lot. I recently picked up a band called Sorority Noise, and they're in the process of releasing their second album, but kind of the first one that's getting hopefully a wider range of, having a larger label and bigger and better press, whatever. And it's really exciting to try to take that to the next level. And I went through that experience with Knuckle Puck, and it was a blast. And I find this level to be very, very fun, but I'm, like Knuckle Puck are gearing up to release their first album and do Warped Tour for the first time, and then probably do a lot of touring again. And that will be a new phase I'm entering. It's curious to me because you've done the cycle a lot of times, and I've never really even done the cycle once yet with my own band that I've managed. So it's a curious difference for me.
Well, and when I picked up Darkest Hour, they came to me, they were already a signed band. And then many of the artists that I picked up since then had been signed. So I was finding artists were coming to me that had already signed to a record label. And so for about 3 or 4 or 5 years in, I started having artists get out of their deals, and it allowed me for the first time to really go shopping, which ended up being a really exciting part to me, was taking artists. And I think that's one of the things that I do like about the developing artists as well, is it allows me to take something oftentimes that no one else has known about or discovered or actually put that stamp of approval on, and go out and have those conversations with people and get other people really fired up about them.
Yeah. It's cool how many different, I guess, little facets there are, like the getting the band to the label process, or this is the recording process, or that one big tour that you hoped for. There's so many little parts of management that add up. It's fun and also stressful.
Completely. No, I mean, it's really never ending. And I think that's probably the stressful part. And, you got to figure out the ways to combat the stress, because the things that cause most people stress will be there all the time, no matter what.
So with that, since you've obviously been through a lot of crises, do you have any advice on how to handle them and how to get better at handling them? So I think that's one of the real troubles people have early on. I know for me that like when first year I was producing records, maybe the first three, if the Mesa Boogie blew up 6 songs into a full length, I'd be crying on the floor at a ball. And now I just look at it, I'm like, yeah, we'll get it repaired and we'll do some vocals now. We're good.
Yeah, I think you realize what you can control and what you can't control, and when to stress over each respective thing. One of the challenges is, and I would imagine, Jesse, if an artist came in today and something blew up, they would probably have that same reaction.
Yes.
And so the difference is your experience has led you to, okay, there's an easy solution to this. It's, and it's usually the solution to a lot of problems. It's throw some money at it, go fix it, buy something new. And, I will say this, it's interesting when you think about the artists that you manage, many of them, the biggest problems come from money. You're trying to have this small business succeed and grow on, incomes and expenses that never really end up in the same place. And so it's, in terms of crises and those sort of things, it's having gone through it and having the experience and, having done some training within my own life, having seen a therapist at points in my life gives me the ability to understand the kinds of questions or ways that they would handle me coming to them with the crisis in my life. So again, that's when I talk about, to me, having the totality of management is having some of this experience that allows you to handle those situations.
Right. If they're worrying about it, you're also probably worried about it or have worried about it in a past situation. Like as recently as yesterday, for me, a band that I'm working with, they're touring consistently for the first time now, and we have like a large merch bill because we're touring for 6 months, and there's some stuff that we need to buy in a larger quantity because we're going to be using it for 6 months. And there's other stuff, which is just we're ordering as many T-shirts as we'll need for this tour. But, seeing a large bill when you're getting a small guarantee a night as one of an opener on a tour, it's like, it's a daunting thing when a band's first starting out and you always need and want to be responsible. But there's like, sometimes it's just a matter of explanation, I guess, in a situation like that.
It can be, but it also can't be, because sometimes people, who are drawn towards the artistic side. And again, I'm not saying everybody's like this, but some of them, especially at that young age and without that experience, don't really know how to manage the business. And even when I started managing, I started managing when I was 30 years old. I had been a tour manager for years before that, had been in my own band, but I didn't understand exactly how to run a business. And I've had to learn that and teach myself that and work with other people within the industry so I would have that knowledge and understand that every small business in the entire world suffers from, the issue of cash flow. And so, Zach, like you're saying, is you're running this big bill up, but it doesn't mean that the cash isn't going to come. Presumably it will if they sell it all. Yeah. But there is that risk that it won't happen. But what's the alternative? To print 200 shirts at a time, pay it, and then have this giant lag where you're giving up a whole bunch of income that could allow you to invest in your business and grow further. And so that's sort of where I think there's a disconnect sometimes. Bands it's not that they're ill-equipped, it's just that it takes some time for things to sink in. You can't just, have a young artist who's saying, oh my God, we've got this giant merch bill, and tell them, well, that's okay. They might say, okay, well, this guy's got the experience to let me know it's okay, but they might also just have to go through it a few times and see that your strategy does work or doesn't, and then you're out of a job.
It's one of those things I think I see now of it's obviously so many friends have kids. It's that thing, you can't make mistakes for your children, and you can't, when the band is kind of your child, you can't, even though you're like, I've seen this mistake, they sometimes need to make that mistake because they just don't believe it. And that is a thing. They have to go through it. They have to live it out sometimes to know that you're right or you're wrong. And sometimes you have to say, trust me, so we don't make this mistake. I've lived that one out already, but it's a tough one to get people to trust you with that.
Mike, you manage not only bands, but also like employees. How long did it take for you to start having other people work with you? Starting, when you started managing 10 years ago?
We probably ended up bringing our initial person on like a year or two in. So pretty early, but it was much different than it became. And we really started about 5 or 6 years ago with having a company of people who, weren't, I guess, viewed as equals. And that's the wrong way to say it, but just weren't on the
different
same
hierarchy.
Yeah. The same professional level, if you will, with the same experience.
Was that out of necessity of needing assistance or out of a desire to try to grow something more?
A little bit of both. It really happened right when social media became the way for a band to, at the early developmental stages, to define themselves and gain some traction and get ahead. Because until that point, I mean, you probably understand from managing your artists, and Jesse, I'm sure you know this, but it's like essentially anything and everything that someone else on your team isn't doing falls into the hands of the band. And of course, if they aren't doing it, it falls into your hands. And so social media became this great tool for people to promote themselves. And bands, when they were first sitting at home and could sit up on MySpace all night and add friends, that was great. But the minute that they started going on tour and didn't have an internet connection and didn't have the time to sit up and promote themselves on MySpace all day and night, it required someone else to do it. And so we looked and said, and at the same time, labels were starting to shrink and responsibilities there weren't being handled. And so I started to look and said, I want to build a team that can truly serve a band, regardless of whether, the members, the other members of the team, meaning the label, the agent, the merch company, et cetera, can do exactly what I would like them to do.
I have maybe a random question spurred off of that. Jesse and I, on our last episode, we talked about I think there was sort of like a groundswell of this feeling several years ago now, maybe 5 or so years ago, that it was like, oh, the album's dead. No radio anymore. We shouldn't even release an album. Maybe we'll only do EPs, blah, blah, blah. Like the music industry is crashing down, whatever. You are still alive and working and having a successful career, and so are many bands, new and old. And that the conversation we had kind of spurred out of brand new, maybe not releasing a full-length album or something like that, and what it would mean for a band of that size to just release singles forever. But part of what you were saying was you started bringing on people when the music industry did start to shift a little. That included social media stuff, but then also like the labels changing up how they ran. What do you think of the current kind of landscape of how you interact with labels and your needs of how maybe management has shifted as labels have kind of morphed over the past decade as well?
Yeah, it's interesting because some of the labels still really employ a number of people that do help with the growth of an artist. I will say I really like having a good label on the team. I am not so full of myself, though some people who listen to this might think differently, but I'm not so full of myself. I think
differently, certainly.
I'm not so full of myself to think that I'm the only person that knows each and every strategy. Throughout some of the development of artists, and we're in the middle of setting up this entire Refused record and album cycle. It has been such a treat to go to someone else, that being Epitaph, and interact with them and their employees who have a ton of experience and a wealth of knowledge to say, okay, how should we do this? And thankfully, we don't always agree. But when we disagree, we come to a resolution that makes sense. And so I really like the added value that a label can bring to a team. That said, you are giving up a pretty significant component of the income that you might be able to derive by doing things another way. On the developmental side, in that stage, I really do see the label as like a validator. there's so much noise and so much competition that having people sign on, whether they be a manager, whether they be a label, whether they be an agent, gives the other people that are doing this all day, not, it's funny, I started echoing. So
Yeah.
Gives the people that are doing this all day and night to a way to look and say, oh yeah, all right, well, that band's managed by such and such person. They're at such and such label. That agent does them. Again, there's exceptions to every rule. There's plenty of people that don't need that for whatever reasons. There are all of these other tools. And there's plenty of people that have that, and it doesn't really seem to get them any steps further otherwise.
I'd heard you talk with Finn McKenty on the Creative Live podcast. So you with Ice Nine Kills had done a crowdfunding campaign because you talked about how they weren't finding a good home for themselves on a label yet. One of the things we do often discuss in the podcast is how this scene seems to be a little bit more behind others. And you talked about like the validator of a label that like I think compared to other scenes, we're still behind in that bands can't really get past a certain point without getting a label involved, and that validator happens. But then you were also just kind of talking about how maybe some bands, after they've had that validator, can maybe go it on their own and be successful. Have you been seeing any change in that? And like, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's a fair point. I also think that, the scene that we're in, for better or worse, has always been one of those that the brands of the labels typically have been just as significant as the breakthrough artists that they're on. And that's what, that revolving cycle is what helps the labels become established and or gives the bands a leg up. And, if we're talking about pop music or dance music or whatever, I don't think the labels have, especially in the last couple decades, have really been a deciding factor in that, the brands themselves. But I'm sure the team behind the label has been, an intricate part of allowing those acts to grow. I don't know. I think it is going to continue to change. And I think that it's nice when you have an artist who has reached a level that doesn't need that validation. I think there's so much that can be done with them, and I think it's really exciting in regards to all that. Did that answer the question, or did I just give
that was actually great.
Or did I just give a very long-winded answer, as Zach knows I like to do?
You're doing great. So speaking of your long-winded answers, you are teaching at, as you mentioned, Kevin Lyman's. Is it Think TEI, or are you guys the Entertainment Institute?
Yeah, it's the Entertainment Institute, but the website cleverly is thinktei.com.
Gotcha. So tell us all about that.
So my relationship has kind of come twofold. One is I've known Kevin for years. I've had bands on the Warped Tour for a number of years. I even tour managed on the Warped Tour for 3 weeks in 2003. But in addition, Matt Halpern, who's one of the founders as well, who drums in the band Periphery, I was very excited and supportive of his previous company, Band Happy.
Great company. I remember when he started doing that. It was such a great idea.
And for me, as a manager of developing artists, one of the biggest challenges is, again, cash flow. So you'd have artists that would come home, and if they were capable of paying all of their bills, at the very end, they typically weren't able to pay themselves. And that becomes a problem, especially when you're someone who's making money, whether the individual members are making money or not. And again, there's exceptions to every rule, but as a whole, it can be such a challenge to provide the service. The agent provides a service, the merchandise company provides goods, you name it, and they all end up getting paid. And the artist says, well, what about me? And as an entrepreneur and a business owner, you're typically the last person to get paid. I pay my employees, I pay my rent, I pay all these things, and at the end, at the end of whatever time period I choose, I look and say, okay, here's what's left over for me. But part of the beauty in that is you're building something that you own. And it's the same for bands. So when Matt came up with the idea for Band Happier, when it was first presented to me, I was like, dude, this is amazing. You're telling me that you and again, his band Periphery, all very technically proficient players, you can go around and teach lessons on the road and make money aside from, this little band business. Amazing. I'm in.
Truly innovative idea.
I support you wholeheartedly. Oh, and then when you're actually home and, you're not spending time working on the record or whatever, you can teach lessons to people online and make money that way. You better believe it. I was like really excited about it. And though I never had a truly formal relationship with them, I thought it was something that was fantastic because it was creating a new stream of revenue, or at least making it more accessible. And so with the Entertainment Institute, though I'm not an owner in any capacity, it's Kevin, Matt, and another partner, Jen Kellogg. I really believe in what they're doing and the opportunities that they're providing for artists so we can avoid that situation where the artists are broke, as well as give younger people who are looking for some advice on the business an opportunity that doesn't require a 4-year school or a short stint at the Musicians Institute. And my reasoning for that is I want a better business. I'm sure I'm guilty of this with people who are, far more experienced than I am. But I find a lot of times with these quote unquote younger managers that are coming in and have spent time with bands and figured out social media, they don't necessarily understand the entire scope of the professionalism and what it takes to be a manager. And so a lot of times for the workshops that I'm doing, I'm trying to provide that information to them.
You're just coming at me.
Well, I'm not coming at you. We've had a conversation and you've done something that I commend and admire. You've taken yourself as a young person who is in that role that I've been describing, and you've partnered with someone else to be a part of a larger organization where if the shit really does hit the fan and you're not capable enough to handle it or just need some assistance, you can go to somebody who's more like me. They've been doing this a long time. They've got the experience and they can weigh in on that.
I think it's very valuable. I through everything I've done since 16, I've always had some sort of mentor at different points in my career, and I don't know when or if that will ever stop. But it would still be, after just even a few years, it would still be very hard for me to do my job, maybe not on a daily basis, but definitely on a monthly basis without being able to ask for help or advice or past experience markers. And I think, like you said, actually to the class that you guested in on, it's in a lot of ways it would be reckless, I think, for someone my age that's potentially in control or in responsibility of anywhere from 0 to 20 men or women, right, without any kind of guidance, without ever having done it before. It's
And don't get me wrong. Again, there's exceptions to every one of these rules. Most of my advice comes from my own experience. So when I was 20, 21, 22, 23, there's probably 80+% of management that I could have done. It's that last 20% that, I'm still trying to better myself with much of it. But it's that stuff that sometimes is really what makes the other 80% actually function and grow the various artists, or handle those difficult situations of which we've already talked about a few of them.
Yeah, I obviously do the website and management and 2 labels and these 2 podcasts, and those are a lot of things. And I often get grief about doing so many things from the people I work with. You are a manager. You now also have a label, and you've been digging really over the last year into a lot of this education stuff. Is that trying on you?
Definitely. I think one of the things that I've always enjoyed is being busy. I'm a person who thrives more on having engagement and having responsibilities than not, and therefore taking on more and more things has made me busier, but part of it has always been, and especially with managing artists, I like to say, and hopefully this is true without certainty, is that if I make a commitment to manage the artist, they get what they need out of a manager. Now, sometimes that's from a member of my team who is in my office or, sometimes not in my office, and we're working together and working closely on all of that. But even as I grow my own roster of bands, I always have to look to myself and say, can I serve this artist the way that they deserve to be served? Now, of course, there's always going to be differing opinions. Sometimes, especially a lot of young artists, they don't necessarily know exactly how they should be served. Again, sometimes they pull what Jesse's saying and they look to others and say, well, that person's manager did X, Y, and Z. They neglect to look at that you're doing A, B, and C that maybe their manager isn't doing. And we have this thing to look at what's missing as opposed to what's there in a lot of cases. But yeah, it definitely can be a challenge in order to do multiple things. Thankfully, I like to think in most of the extra endeavors, I have a partner that allows me to do things to the best of my ability in those cases, while simultaneously being able to continue to do what is really the core of my business, which is manage.
I think those are great points. I think one of the things that's very sad about this is, so I've been reading the Elon Musk book recently, and the guy is in some ways saving the world. He's got a solar city, he's got SpaceX, he's got Tesla, he's doing all these crazy businesses with many facets. And I think people don't always get that there's a lot of people that are only able to handle doing one or two things because maybe they put more time to their family, maybe they just don't have that aptitude to get a lot of things done at once. And I had a trying thing, like when I was managing a couple bands at once, still being a record producer, writing a book, doing a blog, the bands would constantly be like, well, maybe you should do a little less of that and more for me. And I would always have to say, it's like, why don't you talk to your friends' bands and see how many hours their manager puts in? And please tell me if I'm doing less, because I doubt it. It's just that I can do a lot at once.
Well, also, what of those things that you're doing actually help and benefit the band? Zach might be a perfect example of that. Had he just been some snot-nosed kid in Philly that managed a bunch of bands, maybe I would have, treated him a little differently or not had the inclination to want to get to know him. I do kind of pride myself. I really like to get, to reach out to other people within the industry. I do feel like we're all here trying to do the same thing. So if somebody's doing it, I like to know them. But the fact that I'd heard him on the podcast, the fact that he runs his website, that he does all of those things actually made it so I wanted to engage with him more than not. And ultimately, even though our worlds aren't completely overlapping, that helps the artist that he's managing in some capacity.
It's true. I think that is something that's lost, that you doing a lot of podcast appearances, all these things that I've been telling this a lot as advice for younger people, is that, getting out there, blogging, communicating with people really is an invitation. Like, I've made so many great relationships from this podcast and from the blogs I've written over the years that have opened up so many different opportunities for even just my casual friends to hook them up with. And I think that maybe that is a lost sight that gets sometimes overlooked by a band when they're just thinking about, well, I'd really like you to get me that endorsement with that drum company.
Yeah. And it's always going to be somewhat of a challenge. I think it's how confident you are and whether you're actually doing those things and the right things versus how they're going to perceive it. And sometimes, reality and perception are completely off. And what do you do to figure out that solution? Sometimes there is no solution. The solution is, okay, if you like the greener grass on stage left, go for it. I will say some of my very most rewarding management experiences, and I probably have at least a handful, maybe one or two less, are with artists who have been through a shitty experience with either a manager, a record label, you name it. And It's sort of like getting a rescue dog. They are going to love you and be all over you because you treat them the way that they want to be treated. Whereas sometimes if you get a brand new puppy, they bark and run around and are just like, not that I can think like a puppy. But if I could, they might say, well, dude, yeah, I mean, any old Joe could have come in and picked me up, but I'm so beautiful, I'm all this. And I have had those instances where, there's artists who are essentially like, well, we're the ones that are doing this. And believe me, I will always give credit to the artist because they are the ones that are doing it. And that's where you've got to understand that team and symbiosis that you talk about, where they're doing it along with our skill set that hopefully puts them in a position far better than they would have been with, on their own, and hopefully better than with anyone else.
Agreed.
But I will say, there's so, like, on the level of managers that I am, and of course there's such other tiers further along, it's having some self-awareness and saying, okay, Zach's boss, who I know well, I don't know if you call her your boss, Zach, but, the woman of which Zach holds an email address, like, I know her very well. She's just as capable as I am. She probably has some strengths that are a little bit different, maybe some weaknesses that I don't have. But ultimately, if a band is managed by her or they're managed by our company, they're probably going to have a very similar trajectory. And so oftentimes what I see is a lot of times artists, they get a little disillusioned with where they are. They run to another person of the exact same size or the exact same stature, and they end up having the exact same trajectory. I don't know if you guys saw that article with Lord.
About the firing of the manager.
Yeah, and I thought it was a very interesting point.
Could you just spell it out to everybody who didn't so we can discuss this?
I mean, if I recall, my recollection was it was a Billboard article, or no, Guardian. I think it was the Guardian in the UK that said, essentially, they were saying that Lord had fired her manager and that they'd seen a lot of other cases where the young artists that had been discovered by someone had been with them through thick and thin and really had that personal engagement and attachment as well as the professional side. And once they left that initial person who had that fire of, hey, we're developing this together, and they went to someone else who presumably was looking at it more for, cool, here's this amazingly popular artist, we can make some money. The relationship had changed, and therefore the outcome of the career had changed for the worse, not the better.
Yes. And so I have a personal experience of this with me, and I think it's a very interesting thing. And so I have a lot of female friends, and they're
you do, Jesse. Woo!
Not that way. I mean, friends, just friends. Anyway. So they'll be like, oh my God, my boyfriend, this band's going to get famous. I'm like, yeah, that's the worst time to date somebody, because somebody, when they first get success and fame, goes through a radical changing of their brain chemistry. And that's a place, I think, as a manager, I think one of the most interesting things is, were you the quality control person who is saying, no, don't get ahead of yourself? And then do they turn on you at some point and say, no, I am this great, I am believing my own hype? Or do they stay modest? And I think that's one of the hardest jobs. I mean, one of the falling outs I had with a band I used to manage was when they got popular, they were all of a sudden around one of their heroes who told them every easy answer they wanted to hear. And I was sitting there saying the hard answers still and saying, no, it's not that simple. This person knows a music business from 2000, not 2012. And it shattered our relationship. And I think that is a difficult thing to navigate because it's every instance. But as a manager, you also have to learn how to offset that there is going to be people who blow smoke up your ass endlessly, and that's not usually the person who's giving you a hard answer.
I think you're exactly right. And one of the things that I like to do, especially, I'm a person who has those stories of, yeah, I managed such and such, and then they became, much more popular down the line. And, there's always going to be people, and the same reason that I get clients, my bands recommend me oftentimes to other clients. Why? Because they're pleased and elated with the job that I do. But I'll be the first to say, look, I've had plenty of failures as well. You don't come in here and I sprinkle magic dust on you and all of a sudden you become, a huge artist, defining whatever a huge artist is. I very realistically look at myself and say, great. When I put in the hard work and the artist has also put in the hard work, we've made it to the finish line. If I'm dragging an artist over the finish line, they're not willing to put in the same dedication that we are as a company. Oftentimes, there are failures in that regard. So does that make sense?
No, I like that a lot, actually. That's a great thought. So you did hit on work ethic. There was something that you said also on the podcast you did with Finn McKenty that I loved, that I've always thought but never put a phrase to it, which is behind every great company, there's a hardcore kid busting his...
I was going to say, is Finn McKenty paying you advertising dollars, just as I hope Zach's companies pays you advertising dollars?
Finn and I have a deep bromance going. That's very old now.
Speaking of which, I don't know if I told you this, but the last time I hung out with Zach, I said that I imagined you to be like this giant dude with like this massive beard because your voice is so like deep and nasally. But he informed me that that's not the case.
Most bands, when they talk to me on the phone before I produce our record, they come to the studio, they're like, wow, we thought you were going to be 300 pounds with like Captain Lou Albano type of look.
Totally. I guess the only thing that would make me think that it wouldn't be that way is you're not breathing and panting heavily like many of the other giant men I know and women thankfully
that is not the case. So when you encountered the sadly I got this voice when I was still 15 years old and under 100 pounds, so not so much, but I wanted to ask you, what are the traits that you've seen in that? And you and I came from a similar scene of these noisy hardcore bands of the 90s. I'm curious to hear what you see in those traits, and if you've seen tangible traits that have made people into being that.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back as crazy as it is. I mean, we talked about college, and no matter what, you're just in this kind of learning environment. So the hardcore scene, whether you're part of the noisy hardcore scene, the youth crew hardcore scene, whatever it may be, I think that the people that are in there and are the participants, whether they be a band member, whether they be a person that ran a label, they did a zine, they put on shows, all of these things, you're dealing with such limited resources that you have to become incredibly resourceful. And so it's that resourcefulness and the desire to do things and get them done that are the traits that I think bode very well for all the other places in the industry. Again, you can learn these things plenty of other places. Mm-hmm. It's just that it happens to be that is part of music, and we then take it and we've stubbornly stuck with it and we figured out ways to survive. The first many years of my business, and even today, I don't get to run this like a normal business that has, investors that have come in and put a bunch of cash in, or, millions of dollars of sales. I've had to take very limited resources and build out a company and grow artists. That's because for years and years and years in the hardcore scene, that's exactly what we did all day, every day. I presume it's probably the same with you. You figured out how to survive in the producer world, which a lot of producers haven't been able to make that jump. Some of the ones that were immensely successful and have royalties still coming in, no problem. But many of them have been replaced by younger people that, understand the technology, and the expectations are just a little bit, different, in line a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think your point about you figure out how to be resourceful is a very good one. It's just that I think, like, one of the things I often say is that, like, punk rock is a lot of education. You don't have to ask someone to do something, and that you can just start doing it today, and you're going to be bad at it. People are going to kind of accept that there's a few people who will be into it, and as you get better, more and more people will be into it, and you will eventually scale up. I think that's one of the greatest lessons, is that there's so many people who are afraid to be terrible at first, and we were almost allowed to be, I look back at some of those bands that we were, I'm sure, at the same shows of, maybe in different places back then. But yeah, they were arguably unlistenable now by today's standards. but there were some of us who enjoyed them, and they got better and better, and some of them became legendary, like Refused.
It sounds like we need to get Zach on a podcast playing these bands and see what he thinks of.
Oh
of all of them.
boy.
Oh yeah, you know that one would be really, really scary. I would love for him to hear some vocals from Frail.
I might have to decline that one.
Yeah, I would at least like to hear him, hear his opinion on things like Lifetime or, Kid Dynamite, some of the more accessible stuff.
I've never heard of those bands. What label were they on?
Oh, it's like setting it up for you to smash it home, Zach.
Zach, do you have any more questions?
I'm okay. I think this has been a really enjoyable conversation with a lot of good
Did you not
points.
get the tweet from your guy Eastbound to whatever his name is?
Oh, yeah. We were supposed to ask about good hair, weren't we?
It's funny because he was. Actually, I'll let you ask the question and then I can explain the relationship. Do you know this person at all?
He tweets at us.
He tweets at us.
I know him.
Okay,
actually,
I figured. So Zach asked the question, then we'll get the back.
From Eastbound to FKD, yo, please ask Mike. Please ask Mike who has the better head of hair these days. Mike, I don't know how to say his last name. Feet, or
Mike Steve. Yeah,
Steve.
That's the new one. Well, what do you think, Zach?
I don't think Steve. I don't know if Aoki has hair.
Dude, are you kidding me with those sweet cornrows that he's been rocking, or like his entire imagery of his nice long coif hanging down below his shoulders? Do you know who Steve Aoki is?
I do. I don't know much of him.
So do you know the story that he was a very prominent hardcore kid?
I did know this, and I know that Mike is friends with him.
And the gentleman who's asking you all these questions lived in the Pickle Patch, which is where Steve Aoki and I like to have our moments in fame overlap when we were putting on, shows for many artists. Maybe you've heard of some of these, Zach. The Promise Ring.
Really coming at me now. Really just going for it.
It's too much fun because you accept it so well. But
that's what you think. I mean, I'm gonna have to finish a bottle of wine now.
But isn't that every night for you?
That's a lot of them.
Yeah. Well,
Jesse rubbed off on me.
That doesn't surprise me. Anyways, I thought it was funny because the gentleman that continues to ask these questions, before he asked this one, and this is the third one that I've heard him ask. And the first time that he asked it, which was about the knuckle puck shirts, wasn't it, Zach, about the sizing of them?
Yes.
Yeah. I was laughing because, here's this mid-40s adult who, respectfully so, is still out there going to the shows, enjoying the pop punk.
You're blowing up his spot, man. What if he just wanted to like ensue with questions of anonymity to us?
No one's safe from the collateral damage that comes with inviting me onto a podcast, Zach.
Okay.
Well done.
Thanks.
Do we have any recommendations?
I don't know. Mike? What would you like to push onto the world?
I would like to do nothing other than push. No, I don't. I mean, obviously, I'll promote the companies that I represent. Fight Records, PHYTE, Zach, which I probably don't have a website. You probably can't get any of the material anywhere. But the beauty that is the internet will allow you to at least explore such beautiful titles as Botch, the John Birch Conspiracy Theory, and Good Clean Fun, Who Shares Wins.
Clean Fun.
I loved all these records.
Yeah, I thought we would be listening to some Good Clean Fun. Zach really enjoyed the college bit, I know.
It was very funny to me.
And as much as I would like to take credit for all of it, my best friend, Mr. Issa of Good Clean Fun, is the true genius behind it and allowed me to accompany him around the world because I was good at things like logistics and booking tours, which oddly enough, that's, part of the skill set of how I ended up here and what I'm doing. But no, in addition, Outerloop Management, our website, outerloopmanagement.com. It's also outerlooprecords.com. The stuff I'm doing with the Entertainment Institute, Think TEI, outerloop.com. And then
Well, congratulations on your big sale to Concord Bicycle Music.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I just calling you in from the yacht, which the helicopter's landing very soon, so it might
Okay.
it might get a little.
You're taking off.
It might,
yeah,
it might
you
get
have
a
to
little
take off.
loud, but everything has its pros and cons.
Well, thank everyone for listening. This has been a really.
You didn't do recommendations.
Oh, I don't like anything. I'm trying to graduate.
Oh, okay.
Can I
I'm going to recommend the podcast tomorrow.
Oh, I listened to that today.
It's really, really. I listened to all the episodes over the weekend.
Oddly enough, that same sequence when I was really young, I recall this memory of the Today Show, and they would always say, "We'll see you tomorrow on Today." And for the longest time, I was like, I got no clue how that works.
Nice.
Yeah, which I kind of just buried myself in terms of young intelligence, but it just proves, kids, if you stay in school, become a hardcore kid, and have a lot of stubbornness, you too might end up as the CEO of a management company.
Thank you all for listening to Off the Record this week. It was a lot of fun, and we'll be back next week as always. You can keep up with us at offtherecord.fm, and we'll be back soon.